And hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Wisdom Hub TV interview series. Today, I'm super excited about this interview. I'm going to be talking to Pam Gregory, astrologer, for the next hour or so about some of the astrological movements and energies that we're all dealing with right now in the world around us, and particularly some of the astrological aspects that might show us a way to work with these energies more effectively, and also to give us maybe a little bit of a metronome to some of the things we might be experiencing. So without further ado, Pam, good afternoon and welcome to you. I'm so pleased to be here chatting to you today.
It's a real joy to be with you, Davyd. Thanks so much for asking me. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Brilliant. So, yes, I just want to give a brief little introduction about how I came across your work. Really, actually, yourself and a couple of other astrologers really inspired me last year with your presentations, with the way you were talking about the energy and the movement of the planets, and just certainly giving me a guide with which to navigate some of the more choppy waters that I encountered last year. And sometimes, as I share with my friends, you can be having a bad day and you can know exactly what it is, and other days you're having a bad day and you don't know what it is. And so I kind of learned to sometimes look at my chart and go, okay, maybe that's why I'm not feeling so good today. So I really want to thank you personally for inspiring me to go deeper into astrology over the last 12 months. It's something now that, as my friends will say, I've kind of got a little bit obsessed by. But but I just want to say thank you for that, and I'm sure many of our listeners out there would probably agree with that and say the same thing. So we're going to be focusing today on a topic which is very dear to my heart in many different ways, and yourself too, and many of our audience. And we're going to be looking at the theme of organic versus inorganic, the technology of the future. And we're going to be looking at that particular topic through the filter of some of the big aspects and planetary movements that we've got over the next couple of years. And in particular, the one that's, I think, probably charming with everybody at the moment is Saturn Square Uranus. So maybe that's the place to start, Pam. Perhaps you can lead us into that and tell us a little bit more about what's going on there.
Yeah, it really is a clash of the old and the new, because Saturn is very much about the old order and Uranus is futuristic, very much towards the new order. But what is very complex and multi-layered here, that Saturn, the planet of the old, is in the sign of Aquarius, the sign of the future, and Uranus, the sign of the future, is in the sign of Taurus, which is to do with the way things have always been. It's very connected to the past. So this is multi-leveled here. I mean, the good news in these battles between Saturn and Uranus is that Uranus always wins, because it's the furthest out planet. It's to do with the future. That is our future trajectory. That's where we're going. The past is a done deal. As I often say in the videos, we're in a demolition site, it's all crumbling behind us. How well a government's working, how well is the old order working? Not very. So don't waste your time on the focus on the memory of the past. Really define yourself on a vision of the future, what you want to bring in. Yeah. And really, I'd like to dwell in this whole theme of organic versus inorganic, Davyd, even just on Uranus in Taurus, because that is so rich. There's so much to, I could keep digging, write an entire book on Uranus in Taurus. So just thinking about today, and Uranus is going to stay in Taurus till 2026, because Uranus has an 84-year orbit, so it's slow. It's going to stay in Taurus till 2026. And if we think of the values of Taurus, it's a fixed earth sign, it's traditional, it's the simple natural rhythms of the earth, it's slow, it's like your grandfather used to use the horses to plow the fields. Everything is in harmony with nature, biodynamic farming, being aware of the cycles of the moon. The moon is exalted in Taurus, interestingly enough. This is about natural law, where cycles are predictable, stable, reliable, and organic.
Could we also say traditional as well there, do you think?
Very much so, very much so. So it's quite related to the past in that way, but very natural, very organic, where everything was done in rhythm with the seasons and in harmony with nature. Whereas Uranus is the kind of maverick, it jumps forwards in quantum leaps. It wants to make everything efficient, to industrialize, to make it bigger, to make it faster, very connected to science and innovation, make it modern, make it futuristic. And it's very interesting. So I see this really as the clash between organic and potentially the inorganic, but not always with Uranus. And I'll kind of come on to that, or biology versus technology, if you like. And it's interesting. I mean, Uranus, I want to talk about really three big expressions of Taurus. The first set of expressions is agriculture, food supplies, and cattle. If you think of the glyph of Taurus, it even looks like a bull's horns. And cattle, actually, the consumption of beef has dropped phenomenally, dramatically since Uranus entered Taurus, which is quite. But anyway, I'll come on to this. So the first set of meanings I want to explore: agriculture, food supplies and systems, and cattle. The next expression of meaning is the human body, and the next expression is the earth. So let's just deal with agriculture, food supplies and systems, and cattle. If we look at the last time Uranus entered Taurus, that was in 1934. And one of the things that happened then, in order to industrialize farming, make it bigger, make it faster, make it more efficient, in the US, for instance, they plowed up millions of acres of natural grassland, including moisture retaining plants, and to sow wheat. And what happened quite quickly, chemicals were introduced to make, that even more efficient. And it ended up in the dust bowls of the US for years and years, where literally it was just dust. Nothing could be grown at all. Nothing would take root. So that worked really well. And just this month, the BBC had an article that I thought was very interesting for thinking of organic versus inorganic. In Australia, they are tagging cattle, think of Taurus, cattle, with smart tags behind their ears, like little matchbox. These matchboxes, these smart tags are connected to satellites, to GPS systems, and they will not only give the location of each cow, but will monitor its health in every moment. This is called precision farming, and it's going to be huge business in the coming years. So this is literally the expression of Uranus in Taurus, melding technology, innovation with agriculture. Tonight, we are filming this on the 17th of March. Tonight sees the end of a 10-week consultation in the UK when DEFRA, Department of Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs, is very probably going to lift a ban on gene editing in agricultural animals, which would lead to genetically modified agricultural animals, cows in particular, also sheep presumably, in order to boost yields and protect against disease.
Now, I'm thinking, Pam, that they were already going into this in America. I read an article, the two big food agencies in the US are literally squabbling over who gets the jurisdiction over genetically modified animals. Is that correct? Have you come across that?
Yeah. So here we have, I want to say it's a perfect expression. Very far from, it's an exact expression of Uranus in Taurus. Right. So these are the kind of things we can expect in order to industrialize farming. And also this may result in some disruptions in food supplies because Uranus is an erratic energy. It's not steady, it's not linear, it comes in jumps. So because of the extreme earth events, which is another expression of Uranus in Taurus, like, that huge, that terrible series of snowstorms they had in Texas recently, that apparently wiped out all their winter crops and it cost the state $600 million. And I think it lasted about a week or so. That was a weather expression of Uranus in Taurus, but look at what it did to the food supply in that area as well. So we should expect that. So the shadow side of Uranus is this kind of clinical technology where there's a sense of cutting off, almost cutting off from the heart. Because in myth, Uranus was castrated by his son Kronos, who's Saturn. He was castrated. And also emotionally, he disowned his children. Uranus had disowned. So there was an emotional cutting off and a physical cutting off because he was castrated. So you get this shadow side of cutting off. Now I see this in people's charts when the partner suddenly very savagely, out of the blue cuts off. That's how Uranus works in an emotional sense. But to me, this is a cutting, when it's in its shadow expression, it's like a cutting off from divine intelligence in nature. It's man knows better, because man is ever so clever, ever so smart, ever so sophisticated, way better than nature can ever do. And again, the shadow side of Uranus is that it can produce a kind of androgyny. This is true of Aquarius as well, and ultimately a sterility. Now, people listening to this will understand this in many ways, but here, you know, I'm just thinking in a limited sense of the agriculture, in that it has some dangers, let's say, when it's operating in its shadow side, and when things are rushed, because Uranus has this quick, come on, do it quick, we'll make so much better by next month, next year, it'll all be fabulous. Jupiter is an expansive planet that's moving through Aquarius, ruled by Uranus. So let's make it even bigger, and it's rushing through Aquarius at breakneck speed. And so this speediness, you know, we as individual humans have to take a breath, step back and think, hang on, you know, this is coming down the track faster than I can keep up with. Is this what I really want? So our discernment right now is crucial. And it's going to be very interesting, I think, when Jupiter, it'll be in Pisces. It moves into Pisces, I think, on the 14th of May, but it turns retrograde on the 20th of June and starts to backtrack over where it has been with that fast scientific.
When does that happen? The 20th of June?
I think it's 20th of June.
Right, so that's right around the summer solstice.
Yes, indeed. Isn't that interesting as well?
Very.
And of course, Saturn moving more slowly behind Jupiter is the reality check. You know, picking up the steps or pieces after Jupiter. So, you know, we are in a very fast moving, interesting phase with all of this. Now, if we turn to the human body, I will give you a chance to speak eventually. It's all right if I keep going on this.
Yeah, please. I'm making notes. I mean, there's so many questions. If I got into the questions now, we'd never get to the rest of what you got to say. So I'm going to let you say all the things, and then we'll pick apart the really interesting bits for at the end. So that's cool. You rock on, Pam.
Okay. So Taurus is also the human body. So how is Uranus operating in that context? Well, I think there's some very obvious ways it's operating out there in the world that I don't even need to go into. But chips have already been made, for instance, for diabetics, particularly diabetes type 1, which is so hard to regulate. Chips can be put in your body to help you regulate insulin, so you don't go into these dives and into comas. Chips have been developed where paralyzed people are now learning to walk again, which is miraculous and amazing. But chips such as the Neuralink by Mr. Musk have been developed, where what he wants to do with that is increase the rate, faster, increase the rate at which information can be transferred from your brain, where the chip is, to your computer and back again. And he's put this into the brains of monkeys who are now playing video games with their thoughts. And if we go back to, okay, if I
consider that for a second, I feel like I might have hung out with some of those monkeys at some point.
So if our test is ultimately going to be, does this honor divine intelligence? Then you have to decide in your individual discernment which of those examples honors divine intelligence and which perhaps does not. Because I think that's the crucial thing. And with the human body, even food produced in an inorganic way, is that going to affect our body? Because ultimately, what's fascinating here as well is Uranus is very linked to electromagnetic frequency. It's linked to electrics, it's linked to magnetism. And I think what's going to be a big deal going forwards is the actual frequency of food. Can we feel the frequency of food? Because I used to shop in supermarkets, haven't been into a supermarket for a year. And I was already, in buying my organic food in the supermarket, feeling it was dead. Had it been irradiated to be in the supermarket? I don't know, but to me, it felt dead. So if it's processed, you know, and now I get my organic veggies and fruit delivered weekly with no packaging or any of that. But Kirlian photography can see this. We can take a photograph with Kirlian photography of the aura of the cabbage. And we can see that it's full of light, it's full of biophotons, because as we well know, fruit and vegetables absorb light from the sun. That's how they get their energy to grow.
Mhm.
And indeed, you know, I know a couple of breatharians who haven't eaten in years, which is phenomenal. They take their energy, they don't go via the middle cabbage, they take their energy and information directly from the sun through sun gazing. So they don't need to eat, which is just amazing. But more and more, I think we're going to become lighter, less dense beings. We're going to eat less. We're going to eat more lightly. We're going to eat more raw. We're going to eat more organic. But the issue of the frequency of food and how we sense the frequency of food is going to be a big deal in our own, you know, discernment of our energy body. And also, of course, taking the third expression of Taurus as the earth. We know the earth is upgrading at a huge rate. If you look at the Schumann resonance spikes this week, they've been crazy. You know, everybody is feeling this very strong energy. And because the earth is upgrading as a result of all that photonic light, gamma ray, neutrino light coming in, and we are sandwiched between the light and the earth, we inevitably have to upgrade. And I think more and more we are going to really get the principle that everything is energy, everything is frequency. And if you think of Uranus as the planet of awakening, the planet of electromagnetic energy, the planet that symbolizes frequency, it is also the planet that's linked to Kundalini energy and the third eye.
Oh, interesting.
So just really like to drop this in, that if we look at the best expression, or one of the best expressions of Uranus in Taurus, it is for us to develop an inner technology where we can drop into our heart breath, close our eyes, imagine we're breathing in and out through our heart like a lung, slow and deepen our breathing, still with our eyes closed, look up to this third eye. We start to activate the third eye. And I know you spent a lot of years in Buddhist centers and retreats, Davyd, and you've probably got 1,000 better ways to do it. But even that simple way is activating an inner technology. And I actually think that's one of the best possible expressions of Uranus in Taurus, the inner technology, the best of both worlds. But we are at a huge fork in the road and going forwards, and it's already starting to develop, you know, the way Uranus is going to express also in the world in terms of new technology. I think they're going to be very modern, flashy places that are opening up. If you have your correct paperwork, let me say, and your app, and they'll be, you know, buzzy and LED lights and mirrors, and it'll be very metallic and exciting. Uranus, exciting, futuristic, be wonderful. And only certain people can go in there, but there's a kind of sterility that comes with that. Whereas if we think of the Taurus aspect of that, that may be symbolized by, you know, the farmer shop down the road that's been going for generations, and it's a bit shabby, but it's full of fruit and vegetables that have light in them, and you can feel the divine intelligence in that place and the people who work there.
I'm
So
just thinking for myself, I lived in the Middle East for many years in the Gulf states, and then I lived in India for a while afterwards, and I kind of feel like you're describing the two experiences of living in those two places, one very, very shiny but quite sterile, the other one a little bit scruffy around the edges, but really, really amazing food if you knew where to get it, and so much heart and so much spirituality. And so I kind of, there are places in the world that are already a bit like that. And as you're talking, it makes me think of some of these smart cities that are seemingly very much geared towards a new green world, but somehow I feel have this kind of level of sterility possibly already factored in. So I think it's an interesting dichotomy that we are looking at. You know, how do we measure progress? How do we measure evolution? And to me, it comes down to this idea of technology, but what kind of technology? And this is what I was, you know, smiling about what you just said about the inner technology, because it seems very obvious to me that there is an amazing technology available to all of us here in our higher mind, but also outside. Mother Earth is, I think, the most amazing intelligence, and she offers so many different types of technology, which is really why I wanted to do this interview with you today. So perhaps we can loop back to the first point there about the agriculture, the cattle and the systems, because you said some really interesting things, particularly around the production of food and the genetically modified animals, potentially the chips and so on. precision farming sounds on the one hand amazing, on the other hand it sounds really, really sinister to me anyway. It's just like, well, precision farming of what exactly, you know, is in the future. And so how do we start to practice discernment when our options are becoming more limited, you know, because the frequency of food is, as those of us who put our minds and attention into this, is really important, because we are what we eat.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, for many people on a different fork in the road, they may not be eating cattle anyway.
Right, of course, yeah.
You know, they may not be in that place. So it's not a problem for them, as it were. But I think you just got to, again, drop in, not so much the mind, because the mind can deceive us, dropping into the heart and saying, does this feel right for me? I use a pendulum a lot, which is like an extension of your intuition. Other people use muscle testing, or just get a sense of it in their body, you know, through swaying or whatever it is. But just check in with your heart and you. Is this good for me? Is this good for me? With every food you eat, with every food you buy, is this going to be for my highest good, my highest light, and my highest spiritual evolution, or not?
Would you also take that a step further to include the places where you potentially get, you purchase or obtain your food from?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, very much, and we had a chat about it in our pre-session, Davyd, that because the Aquarius is this grassroots up energy, I know of several people now who are putting together communities based on new earth principles, where they're buying land, they're going to group together, they're going to grow their own food, and they're going to be little hubs of light studded across the world. And they may link up with each other to swap vegetables or whatever, but everything is going to come from the earth, be natural, be organic, and honoring divine intelligence. And that's the way society is going to be reborn, with this big fork in the road. And I mean, the choice is immense. Well, it's actually very simple for you and me, but I mean, the divide is immense. The divide is bigger than we've ever known in our entire lifetimes, because the bandwidth of frequency is wider than we've ever known. So, you know, making these decisions is going to propel you on one fork in the road or the other, and that becomes absolutely life determining from that point on, because it's getting wide. You know, at the moment we might be able to, we got on the wrong train at Euston and we just about jump off it and get on the other train that's also leaving the station, but you can't jump at, you know, 100 miles an hour from one train to another. So the decisions we're making right now, today, here, wherever you are in the world, are going to determine which path you take in that fork in the road.
Absolutely. And I guess many people out there who perhaps are new to some of this might think, how did we get here in the first place? You know, even into the world of where we're at right now. But if you've been paying attention, this has been a long time coming. And I think that many of the things that you're talking about, I would imagine much of our audience, and probably yours too, would already have been factoring this into the way they're making decisions. But for me, discernment, and actually, and this is the Buddhist in me, the principle of ethics and morality, and how we discern the provenance of our information, of our food, of our medicine, even, you know, maybe the circles that we move in. It's like getting back to, maybe this is 4 planets in Scorpio, but getting back to the essence of the truth of things is really important to me. And I think as we move forwards, that's going to be an important motif for many of society who are looking to perhaps change some of the things, the challenges that we faced over the last couple of decades in the world that have been going in a certain direction, shall we say. And it feels like this is an opportunity to perhaps recenter some of those things and say, okay, that wasn't working for some of us. Maybe now's an opportunity to look at things differently, but to come back to this place of divine intelligence as our center point, I think is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so interesting what you say as well, Davyd, because another expression of Taurus, as well as food, is our value system. So with Uranus there, every single one of us has had a radical change in our value system. What doesn't matter anymore? Well, stuff. Who's buying stuff? Who's buying clothes? There's nowhere to go, you know, who's buying stuff? So, you know, what we really value now is our relationships, our friendships, our you know, people who are close to us. And also that the food we're eating, I mean, for you, I'm positive, and for me also, it has to be food that's grown with love. And, you know, I'm a huge animal lover, so I just couldn't eat a dead animal. Yeah, I just couldn't do it, you know, I just couldn't do it. And I'm not preaching there, that's just my particular value system. But for many of us, that value system is changing. changing really radically because society is changing in such a huge way.
Yeah, there's an interesting point you raised there, actually, which I think is worth bringing into this mix, which is around being vegetarian or not being vegetarian, because there's a very strong energy at the moment that's creating vegan meat. Okay, I've seen the whole counter in the supermarket. It looks a bit strange, and I've heard some very strange stories from friends who've seen videos about how some of this stuff is made. Now, I was vegetarian for a long time because of the same reasons as you. However, it didn't work for me. It actually made me sick, and my body. I ate healthily. I ate good protein food. I had a good diet. I still have a good diet, but I needed to eat a little bit of meat, and so that actually radically altered my perception of dietary requirements for individuals. And so I kind of I had to have a really big shift because I was quite a moralistic vegetarian for a good number of years, as some of my friends might like to remind me. But I also realized that in the end, it's like we all have to make decisions that are based on what's good for us. And so I kind of think as we move into this new era, vegetarianism seems to be a big part of the motif coming from a certain part of the political spectrum, along with many other ideas, which I find a little bit challenging. But I just wondered how you see that developing in this kind of motif. Do you think there is going to be a move away from the need for humans in general to eat meat? I mean, we're going a little bit into this topic, but it's interesting because it's Taurus and it's bovine, and so there's been this whole thing about climate change has been blamed on cows, I think, a few times by some people. So it's kind of an interesting kind of filter through which to look at this. But do you have anything you wish to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely, because we expected a radical shift in eating of cows, eating of cattle, with Uranus moving into Taurus, and the figures have dropped incredibly of people stopping eating meat and becoming much more vegetarian. But with regard to what you were saying, Davyd, about the vegan meat that was produced kind of in a laboratory, again, I'm back to how much light does it have in it. Initially, I thought that was a wonderful idea because, oh, isn't that wonderful? It saves animal cruelty and factory farming, and isn't that great? But then I come back to, okay, does it have light in it? Does it have divinity in it, or has it just come out of a factory or a lab? In which case, I don't feel so good about, because what's actually in it then that I'm taking into my body in every cell? Not sure about that at all. So, but generally, I think people are going to be eating more lightly, more plant-based, more organic, and less and less food as we go through to becoming. We step back, perhaps, into becoming galactic citizens, which is where I really think we're headed. We're just at the threshold of that right now.
I mean, there's so many things in that, and like you, I agree. I'm sure I wouldn't have been the first vegetarian who wondered what exactly was in those vegetarian sausages I was eating. It kind of tasted good, but you were never really quite sure what the substance was. I know it was kind of positioned as being something of like fungi based, but I was never too sure, and it did feel like it had been produced in a lab. So I think that's a really kind of important point though about this kind of organic versus inorganic, because it gets a bit blurred, right? Many people would be totally in favor of a vegetarian world, and I certainly wouldn't have a problem with that either, but I wouldn't want to be living in a vegetarian world with that kind of food. So that makes me equally uncomfortable. And also, this idea of Taurus being traditional and looking at agriculture of the past. Now, I'm not saying that we need to go back into the fields with the old wooden tillers, and I don't think that's necessarily what we're looking for. But what I think could be really interesting is becoming much more in tune with old heritage seeds and fruits of the lands that we live on that maybe have got forgotten in the excitement of having exotic overseas fruits and vegetables. Now, I love my avocados, but they're not a native plant to Britain. And I'm sure that we've got something equally tasty that perhaps has been forgotten over the last couple of hundred years. So do you see that Uranus moving into Taurus could be a sort of maybe new plants, new seeds appearing, or maybe old ones reappearing?
Absolutely. This is very rich as well, because what I think will be happening with this new light is that the kind of fundamental, how can I say this, fundamental structure that we've known in nature, like the Fibonacci sequence, the flower of life, that is going to evolve to a higher level and will produce new species of plants and animals and fish and all the rest. But the other answer to that was in my head, Davyd, is you may have heard me talk about these Kuiper belt objects out in space beyond, Neptune and Pluto. Many of the archetypes of those are extremely futuristic and galactic in that they are really seeing reality from a quantum point of view, that you can create the jump, you can instantly set your intention, set your frequency, and manifest. Like Homer, goddess of fertility in Hawaii, who was very regenerative and able to birth babies from legs, arms, all over the place. But she also has in her archetype an ancient shamanic connection to the earth, deep, deep connection to the earth. So does Sedna, who's way, way out there. And a lot of the archetypes of these KBOs, these Kuiper Belt objects, are linked to the indigenous tribes like Kwawa, who the archetype is all about, that we can sing and dance our reality into being from a high frequency, because singing and dancing take you to that high frequency, and we manifest, we sing and dance our reality into being. All of them are linked to indigenous tribes that take us back to the ancient ways with the earth, the shamanic understanding, the harmony, the listening to the earth, not trashing it and exploiting it. So we're going to be kind of going in two directions as I see it. We're going to be leaping forward into a galactic understanding, but equally we're going to be coming way back to love the earth at the same time, and bring it on, I say. Both of those, and that's really, again, Uranus and Taurus, isn't it? Uranus, the galactic, and Taurus back to the earth again.
I mean, for me, from my plant work, what this speaks to me is the oak tree. So the oak is very traditional. It's the king of these lands, but it's also the three doors in the Druid tradition. So the roots into the earth, deep into the earth, strong, centered, held, arms reaching up to the heavens, reaching to the galactic frequencies, but strong in ourselves, in our trunk, in the middle world. And so this, to me, now that you're saying this, it's like, this to me feels very much like the energy of the oak tree, where we are encouraged to be self-sufficient and be masters of our own space, but have so much mastery of our own space that we can invite others into our space and accommodate, in the oak's case, thousands of beings in its branches. It can even grow other trees in its branches. So this is the energy of the oak, and it's like it's really, really old, but it's also super futuristic, because the oak can channel the high beings, the frequencies in through its branches, and yet the oak is not quite as old as the yew tree, but it's very, very old, right, in terms of how long it's been here. So this, sometimes when we think about the past, it can feel a bit archaic, right? It's people say, oh, you we're all just Luddites, you just want to go back to some archaic time when it was all better. And it's like, some part of me does want that, but I'm not such a Luddite that I'm not open to working with the technology that is available to us in the right ways. And I think that that's, to me, a really important factor. But you mentioned the quantum field, and I think this is really interesting, because to me this speaks of higher mind intelligence, but also how we manifest. This is how I understand the quantum field. Myself and my wife work as healers in the quantum field. We're quantum psychic healers. That's what we do. And so we know how effective this can be if we are nice and clear in ourselves. So perhaps you can talk a little bit more about that, and how you see this developing, and how we can develop ourselves, or maybe pointers you'd like to point people in the direction of.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're back to Uranus and Taurus, aren't we? It's the frequency in the body. So when we're able to raise our frequency, and we can do that by singing, dancing, strong breath work, yoga, candle gazing, all of those things that you and I, I'm sure, talk about all the time, that we can raise our frequencies. Then we set a very clear intention, present tense, for what we are already manifesting in our world. And that is how we start to bring things into our reality. And the synchronicities, we meet the right person, or, we just read something that's the right place to go. So these synchronicities start to pop up. So it's no longer the 3D efforting, pushing, you've got to do A and B to get to C, and you've got to do C to get, it's none of that. It's a jump. And that's how we're going to start to manifest. But equally, I believe we are going to be developing, as we've just been talking, this deeper understanding of nature. So we start to appreciate the richness of nature in a different, in a much bigger way, to get us to those high frequencies. For instance, sure, you've read the book. I think it's called The Spirit of Plants. And it's an amazing book about the different medicinal values of every single plant.
I've read lots of books about plant spirits and medicine, so there could be any number of them. I mean, it could be Pam Gregory, Plant Spirit Healing. That's one of the most well-known books. My wife's also got a book coming out about plant spirit journeys later this year on Bear & Co. So, I mean, for me on that tip, my path to working on my higher mind has been through nature. It's been through working with the plant beings, the tree beings, the intelligence in nature, helping them to clean me out, tidy up my traumas, create more space in the vessel so that those higher frequencies come in. It's very difficult to absorb higher frequencies when you're filled with rubbish, you know, baggage, traumas, etc. So the process, this is where I find the marrying of Buddhism and plant work is very interesting, because the plants bring the Buddhist ideas to life. But Buddhism can be a little bit dry, and they used to call people dry logicians in Buddhism. They get a little bit too in their heads, too much lung energy, too much energy stuck up here, not enough in here, and it's impossible to connect to nature up here. You have to do it from here. So this process of being present with nature brings us out of our monkey mind down into our heart, where we can start to breathe, and then we can start to communicate. So I think this is really interesting, because it feels it's the technology of the past. Our ancestors use this. The Druids use it. Nothing new. So this is ancient technology, but it's so futuristic at the same time.
And there's a couple of things are coming into my mind here, Davyd. A good friend of mine, very gifted lady called Janet Trelawer, who channels a wonderful being called Zachariah. She taught me how to really connect with trees. She said, firstly, you have to ask the tree if you can approach it, because trees are very polite. And then you have to lean with your heart against the tree. You may know all of this, and just make that connection, start to feel the energy, the heartbeat of the tree. Then ask the tree to take from you anything you do not need, and then for the tree to give you back anything which you do need. And each part of that process takes several minutes. So the whole thing would take, you know, minimum 10 minutes or so. But you start to develop relationships with different trees that have different energies. And I'm sure this is bread and butter to you. You know, in lockdown, maybe that's as good as it gets. But anyway, but the other thing I wanted to say about how you really start to connect to these higher levels, and this is a personal example, because for about a year my crown chakra has been just on fire, and I have a lovely gifted healer friend called Sandy Humby, and she's taught me what to do with that, to connect with a kind of rod of light up to the soul star, to bring that column of light down through the body via your third eye, your pineal, your third eye, down into the earth star, and then expand that white column of light. So you're squeezing out anything which you don't want from your aura. And your electromagnetic, your aura then becomes coherent, much bigger, and you're shining out light to the world. And I do that every day now to kind of pull this kind of, you know, on fire crown chakra down through me. But I'm also connecting to above, to whatever is coming in from the galactic sphere as well. Because Uranus was the sky god, right? So he's coming from up there.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've also experienced a lot of, I would say, distortion, to be honest, across my third eye and the crown chakra, as have many of our students over the last period of time, over the last year or so, and there can be many reasons for that. But I guess what's really interesting is once we know really clearly what's us, and perhaps what is something external, we can get a little bit more adept at holding our space, our energetic space better. And whether it's practices like the one that you've just described, or the heart entrainment with the tree, there are many, many different ways to get into those spaces. But this, to me, is the steps towards the higher mind and becoming more energetically sovereign. Do you think that's part of the motif too?
Yes, I completely do. This is very interesting, because it's having mastery over your own energy. I think that's absolutely vital as step one, because if you haven't got mastery over your own energy, you know, nothing will work properly. Your health, your life, etc. If we're scattered, that's why it's great not to ever watch the news, because that's just anyway. But having said that, having mastered our energy, and we are each becoming more individual, because Uranus is so strong, the Aquarius energy is so strong, we're going to be developing more of our unique talents. Equally, the Uranus and Aquarius energy is about the power of the people then coming together in community, because we know from all the massive evidence out there, whether you look at Dr. Joe Dispenza, Lynn McTaggart, whatever, you know, just 10 tons of evidence of the increased power of the energy and the intention when we come together with others in a group. It could even be a group of 6, a group of 8, or a group of several thousand, all coming together across the globe, holding hands digitally and spiritually, focused on a better world, a new earth, and making a difference. So we're starting to pull that new earth into reality simply by expressing those higher frequency emotions of love, joy, gratitude, appreciation, all of that stuff, and not knowing what the frequency match will be, just trusting the laws of quantum physics, that if that's what we're putting out, we've got to get a frequency match back in our reality. So just, you know, hitch your wagon to a star, trust those high frequency energies, master your own energy being, and then meet up with others, because that will really, you know, these times are massive that we're going through, even for people who have some understanding. You know, nobody's finding it's a breeze right now. It's not a breeze. It's tumultuous.
Not meant to be either, right? It's meant to be a challenge. This is the turning of a spiritual age, and I feel we are very blessed to have front row seats. Sometimes maybe the front row seats are getting pelted by the rotten tomatoes.
And worse. Yeah.
I wouldn't want it any other way. You know, I feel like I've waited a long time to be a part of this. And, you know, just a couple of things there that I just like to come back to because they really resonated. First of all, the idea of trust. When we have absolute trust in the divine, we drop into the flow of the Tao, the flow of the river, and we stop worrying quite so much about outcomes. And you know, I work a lot with my magic and energy way, the most appropriate. I'm always asking for what is the most appropriate thing for me now. So I don't place any expectation on it. And so whatever turns up is the most appropriate thing. So I can only ever be happy with that. I can never be disappointed. And since I started adopting that technique a few years ago, it's taken a load of stress off my head. So now I'm just like, look, you know, I still have things I want to do, still have plans to make, etc., etc. But how I get there is less of a concern for me. I just say, okay, this is a prayer that feels congruent. I feel it in my body. I give it to spirit, and then I let go of it, and I just carry on. And then those sort of Uranian bits drop in. Okay, there you go. Bill, I wasn't expecting that, but hey, that's exactly what I needed. And so that leads me into the other point, which is about the motif of the Aquarian age, moving on from what we were just talking about being energetically sovereign. It feels to me that as we move into this process, we went through her story of the hive mind, the other world, many, many thousands of years ago. We then had the patriarchal period of the last 6,000 years, his story. And now I feel like we're moving into our story. And so this next age for me, I think, is going to be our story, and how to manage that, though, as sovereign beings where we can be self-masters, but then enter into a community where everybody is like that. That to me feels like the dream of the Aquarian age, is to be in community, which, as I understand it, is a large part of Aquarius, but also how do we enter into those communities as completely self-sustainable, self-sufficient individuals?
Gosh, I think it's just actually doing exactly what you've just said, Davyd. It's so interesting when you were talking about kind of no attachment to the outcome. Of course, we're back to Uranus in Taurus. It's cutting off any attachment, because, you know, Taurus is quite attached. It's fixed as a fixed earth. So it wants, you know, to hang on to what it's got. Don't rock the boat. But Uranus is saying, no, cut off, you know, just get into the flow of life at a higher level. So I think it is just really, as you say, completely trusting that you have mastered that as a process, that you just say, okay, for my highest good and the highest good of all, let it fall where it may, as long as it's for the highest good and highest good of all. I say that before every chart session I do, actually. Mm-hmm. And I also say that at the beginning of every day as well. So then there's so many wonderful divine synchronicities have happened in my life. You start to trust the process more. Once you get into that kind of flow, that modality of living that way, you just trust it more and more and more. And just let everything that's been in your past go, even if it's your home, even if it's an important relationship, if it's not right for where you're at energetically, because everything will come down to the frequency that you're at. And the way people are coming together in community, it is all about the frequency match. And you know, if you're not on the same frequency match, that community won't come together, won't hang together. So that becomes the determining feature, not how much money you've got or which geography are you currently in. That's kind of irrelevant.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I was watching a celebrity cookery program on television yesterday, and the theme for that particular dish was holiday memories. And the way that it was phrased is that we cling on to our holiday memories so tightly that we need to recreate them. I'm like, well, I don't think I cling on to my holiday memories. I cherish them, but I'm certainly not clinging on to them and trying to recreate them. But this was how it was pitched to the people, you know, who had that task to do. And I'm just like, wow, this is a very interesting narrative, that we are being encouraged to cling on to things in the past that have already happened, and we're trying to recreate them. So, you know, it's kind of, for me personally, clinging on to things doesn't really ever give you anything other than a sore back from carrying a lot of stuff.
Yeah, totally. And the age, you know, if we really want to step into that higher path of the fork in the road, we can't hang on to anything from the past. You know, it'll be like a ball and chain for us. We just have to open up to the energy. And it's, you know, this is the the most tumultuous time of our lives, but it's the biggest adventure of our lives, energetically and spiritually. It's the biggest adventure we've had in many, many, many lifetimes. This is what we've waited for thousands of years. God, I'm going really goosebumpy now. So, you know, if this is it, we can't muck it up. We can't muck it up by saying, no, no, I actually really need to stay with this person or this home or this job or whatever. Yeah. We just got to let it all go, because, you know, if we truly believe in our frequency, then we know something much, much better is going to come down the road to replace it. And the past will seem like dust, almost like it didn't ever exist. It will just dissolve.
And there's a process here, and this is why I wanted to emphasize about the trust, because, you know, when we have that trust, it gives us the power and the bravery and the strength to let go and say, okay, you know what, this is really painful, really challenging, but I understand and I trust that maybe this needs to go now. And it's interesting, I hadn't quite put the pieces together, Uranus and Taurus in that sense, but to me, you know, it makes perfect sense. And of course, in Buddhism, we're taught it's attachments and aversions that cause all suffering. And I meditated at length on that for a while as a student. I'm like, I couldn't find anything that didn't fit that bill. My aversion to something more, my attachment to it, those were the things that were causing me suffering in life. And so, interesting. The final piece I'd like to talk about for the sort of the final 5 minutes is just to come back to point number 3 and the Earth. Now, I'm sure you're aware, because I know that you're very aware of what's going on in the world, but there's been a huge earthquake swarm in Iceland, right, over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I think there were about 17,000 over a 2-week period. I mean, it was just insane, because they do have a lot of earthquakes, but it's been mega, you know, it's been way ahead of normal. And you know, the earth is changing rapidly. She can't experience all, you know, it's working on a physical level, a cosmological level, but also a spiritual level, because the light is creating these upgrades. And if the Schumann resonance peaks, it has to affect the earth. It's affecting us. We are connected to the earth. We're not, you know, we've had this illusion that we've been separate and dominating of her. But she's kind of groaning and protesting. She's going through childbirth, if you like, or rebirth. And so, again, the symbolism of Uranus, planet of earthquakes in Taurus, you're going to see a lot more earthquakes, a lot more volcanoes, a lot more extreme earth events as the earth gives birth again at a higher level. She's raising her octave, and she can't do that quietly or seamlessly. So as she is cracking open, as it were, equally,
right,
we are cracking open to move to a high level.
I mean, it's kind of like the seismic shifts in us are reflected by the seismic shifts in Mother Earth. The seismic shifts in Mother Earth are reflected in us because we are part of nature. We are, us humans, we are part of the natural cycle. And I think that for me, is the thing that's really been forgotten. There's so much separation, sometimes through the technology that stops people. People are experiencing nature through a computer screen. It's like, no, nature's outside. You have to go and take your socks off, walk barefoot on the land, breathe the clean air if you're lucky enough to live in Wales like we do, where we have mountain air. And for me, this comes down to the organic versus the inorganic. How are we experiencing reality? Are we experiencing it organically, or are we experiencing it inorganically? And I guess this is a question that's going to run and run over the next few years. But as we sort of come to our conclusion around this, Pam, do you have anything you'd like to share as a message of hope? I love what you said about the groups of light. Many of us have seen similar things in our journey work and our visions, and many of my spiritual friends would say the same, sort of a patchwork of light portals all over the planet, sort of almost self-sustainable, almost sovereign perhaps, working in these ways with higher mind technology, working with earth technology from the ground up to create sustainable ways of living that are not antiquated, are totally futuristic, but with a different type of technology. Is that something you'd like to expand on?
Yeah, it really is, because it's happening now. It's not that we've got to wait 10 years down the road. It's now. I mean, I'm in touch with about 3 or 4 groups, and I know about half a dozen people who are doing this right now. They're connecting with other people. Some of them have already bought land or a farm. Others are looking for it right now. And they're connecting with their tribe, and they're saying, okay, how do we get a separate water supply? You know, how do we come together to make this happen in a practical sense? So it's not like this is a futuristic thing. It's happening now. And if it isn't happening for you yet, set that intention. I'm already easily finding people of similar frequency with whom I can start to build a community. And geography doesn't really matter. It'll just fall where it may. So set that intention, and very quickly online, you'll be connecting. I mean, the great thing about Uranus is the online bit, but then we've got to make it real on the earth. But it is happening now. These, you know, I talked in a video a few months ago about I see green shoots coming through broken concrete. And I'm really seeing that. I'm seeing the manifestations of the new earth, people coming together saying, no, we do not want to live in this mirrored steel, futuristic society. We're going to just duck out and we want to experience nature physically with our hands and feet in the mud, not virtually. I mean, when I have my morning walks in the forest, I never take a phone with me. Ever. I never take a phone with me when I go out at all, actually. I just never switch it on, actually. Because, and it's a very conscious decision.
Yeah.
My life is not about my mobile phone.
Great.
I could chuck it in the bin or down the look. You know, my life is not my mobile phone. I have to use a computer, but my grounding is absolutely the earth, and I'm reaching for the stars.
And, you know, you mentioned a really important word there, which, of course, is a big part of new moons. And we also have equinox this weekend, is intentions. You know, and this again is the trust. When we make those prayers, if we make those prayers nice and clear and we send them in our ceremonies or with our heartfelt gratitude and then we let them go, then it's amazing what can happen. And I've seen this with Wisdom Hub recently, you know, as an online community, it's suddenly had a huge amount of interest, a bit like yourself and your work I've seen over the last 12 months too, because there's a quality to it that's resonating with many people. And now people are looking to come together in a certain way. Before, I think there was too many distractions, and 2020 really was the year of clear vision because it removed a lot of the distractions to see what was left. I kind of think for me, 2020 was a year of wormwood. Wormwood is a plant I work with a lot, but wormwood is really about stripping away everything until you get to the bare bones of the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And then you have, okay, now I know what the truth is, I can build outwards again. And I feel 2020 was a bit like that for those of us that were paying attention. So can you speak a little bit for the final few minutes about intentions and how to work with that through the astrology? And maybe is Saturday, the equinox, a good time to put out intentions?
Really good, really excellent time, because, you know, for many astrologers, myself included, it really does begin with a big bell to chime the next 12 months. It's the beginning of the astrological new year within the context of this new paradigm, this new 200-year air paradigm of Jupiter and Saturn moving through air signs with their conjunctions. So it's a really good time. The way I use intention is always to use the present tense, because if you say I want, you're pushing it away to the future the whole time. So always present tense, and make it easy. So I am already easily finding my XYZ. You know, XYZ is easily already flowing to me. I will find, you know, it's present tense. I am already easily finding my car keys. I'm already easily finding a car parking space. So, and if you do it with that ease and flow, then just release it to the universe and hey presto, stuff happens.
Yeah. 3 principles of magic: call something to mind, fill it with an emotion, and send it. Magic is possibly the most misunderstood thing, but our world is completely full of it because humans have been using it for thousands of years. And that's it. It's, you know, the trick is to call good things to mind and charge them with good emotions like love and compassion and all of those beautiful things that we want to fill our world with. And so, as a final thought, Pam, where can people, you know, I was going to say directly to your site, but I know that you're so busy, you don't want any more clients, but I'd love for people to find out more about your work, to check out Pam's fortnightly podcast she does on the new moon and the full moon. They've been a godsend for me. They've kept me sane at some points when I thought I was losing my noggin last year, because, you know, knowing that something else is going on externally, which, I mean, you know, we think about the effect of the moon, never mind the effect of Saturn or Jupiter on these huge titans, you know, and I think that that's often a little bit forgotten in the Western world. So where can people find out more about your book and your videos, Pam?
Yeah, pamgregory.com. I've got 2 books plus an audio book. Several teaching videos. I do a very long monthly newsletter, 6,000 to 7,000 words every month about global events, and can expand a lot on stuff I just don't have time to say in the videos. So I do that. Sadly, I'm not booking any more client work this year. I've got to have some just space to breathe and do other things. So sadly, so please don't write to me, because you know, I just can't reply to, you know, I'm getting 1,000 emails, messages a day. It's just not possible to reply to everybody. So very sorry about that. But there's still a lot that you can access via my website. And of course, my YouTubes, as Davyd said, go out twice a month. And yes, this is a fantastic fantastic time at the Aries equinox, setting new intention. And we will be discovering that magic again that you talk about, Davyd, that your world is so immersed in. You know, we are going to be discovering the magic of nature, the shamanism and the medicine and the depth to it and the nurturing that it can give us. And that's going to be a huge pivot point for us as humanity.
Well, look, you know what? I mean, despite the challenges, I'm super excited about all of it. I have my good days, I have my bad days, as I'm sure we all do. But you know, having the knowledge of the planets and the stars and what's going on around us also reminds us how small we are and how big the universe is and how much potentiality there is in all of that. And you know, I just want to say again to our audience, please do check out Pam's newsletter. It's really good for a small monthly fee. I think it's well worth it. There's lots of juicy information. Plus, Pam turns up really amazing bits of news that I hadn't come across, and all the stuff about the Kuiper belt. Very, very interesting for those of us who have an interest in shamanism and indigenous cultures and indigenous healing practices, because yes, a lot of the these new planets being found are being named from indigenous places. So that's really, really interesting. So, you know what? This has been one of the quickest hours of my life. I think we've got through so much in an hour. So, you know, I hope maybe this is a conversation that we continue at some point in the future, Pam, you know, as things develop and this higher technology, our higher mind technology develops, and we create new things, maybe with Mother Earth in a positive way. Maybe it would be nice to do an update at some point. But for now, thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule and chatting with me today. And please keep on doing all the great work that you do, Pam. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Davyd. It's been an absolute joy. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much for asking me. Wonderful.
Blessings on all of our audience out there. Enjoy the equinox and see you all again very soon. Thank you for now.